to the next episode of The Lair. Joining me today are two very special individuals that I can say, if it wasn't without my guidance in 2015, where they interned for me, and then eventually taught their mom everything she knows about mobile security.
Exactly.
Probably wouldn't be here today.
Pretty much.
So Cynthia and Olivia Harrison, thank you so much for joining me today. It is great to see you all. How are you all out there in lovely Virginia?
Well, as you know, as much of the other country, Virginia is going through a lot. We are in a very safe space, but with everything going on, I think, we've got schoolwork, we're doing summer classes, and we're trying to keep up with everything that's happening in the world and stay safe from COVID. So we've been better, but we're a lot luckier than other people.
Sure. So the audience doesn't know which one's Cynthia, which one's Olivia.
I'm Cynthia.
And I am Olivia.
Which to go by CC and Livy.
Yes.
Well, again, welcome. Originally, and we'll have to talk about this at another time, but I originally wanted you to come on because there are a lot of students, myself included at the time, because I had to finish my MBA the last 2 months online, that went from being on campus, having an external environment to where you were kind of forced to go through a process, you had a schedule, to now being completely removed from that and having to do everything somewhat ad hoc in classes. But I found out through your mom that you all were attending a protest because of everything that is going on. And I felt, wow, what better thing to kind of come and talk about with the next generation that's coming up. This is a very important matter, and wanted you all to take on it. And I don't know if you all know, but I had a young man that works for me that originally he was going to come on and talk about this. He's an African-American, but became very emotional. Is not right. He said he's not in the right frame of mind to talk about this right now. And I felt, wow, I'm glad he was able to still feel comfortable, want to talk, comfortable to say, no, I'm not in the right frame of mind, but I want to continue to get the message out, especially with the generation. He's only a couple of years older than you two. So quick synopsis, how are you all feeling about what's happening with all these protests and yet another senseless life lost? Especially when I look at it, the police didn't follow their own procedure. To me, the procedures are there for a reason, and they didn't follow it.
Absolutely. I think the events of the last week and months, are obviously only a glimpse of a history of oppression by institutions of Black people. And being a white person, I'm obviously not, I follow the Black Lives Matter movement and I support them, and I'm trying to continually learn about what I can do to be a better ally, to better support people. But I'm not a trained spokesperson, and nothing I say is gonna always directly follow what they're saying. But it's been really hard, and I think it's taken a lot of mental toll. I can only imagine what Black people and your friends who are going through are experiencing, having to acknowledge everything that's happening. And I think there's a large feeling of helplessness about everything that's going on, when, especially as a college student, when you're not really in the workforce, you're not really a part of institutions, and you're often looked down upon because of your age or whatever reason. And so just trying to focus on things that allow me to air my beliefs and show my support and do whatever I can to learn about what's happening and support people.
I think that's important. You can't really know what all of them are going through, but we can certainly feel empathy to this. And I think that's important in today's society is, when one of the things, I know you all go to a lesser school at Virginia Tech than it is to be at University of Michigan.
Oh, yes.
But outside of that, and I'm sure all of the business schools have a certain thing about with leadership that they're teaching. But one of the things, at least in the Michigan model, they really emphasize empathy. And I had someone question on LinkedIn, how can you lead with empathy? Well, I think if you don't have empathy, you're not going to be a very good leader. And part of that's knowing the types of people that work for you, the communities that you're trying to serve. You have to be able to predict their future desires and needs. And clearly as a nation, while we're much better than what we were in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that doesn't mean there's still not a lot of work to do. And what I constantly face are people, whenever they hear Black Lives Matter, they want to respond with all lives matter. So I guess the next question for you two, what do you feel when people say all lives matter?
I think for me, it's not troubling to hear that, but it's so obscure to hear that, because of course my life matters, but I am told by every part of society that my life matters. I feel nothing but support, and that includes from the government, and that includes my close surrounding family and my university and everything. So of course my lives matters. You don't need to tell me that, because every part of our legislative system supports that. And while yes, there have been legislative changes, and like on paper, Black people have the same rights as white people. And I've heard that argument before, like our government completely supports people of all races. It's in the Constitution, and it's in the Constitution, but that's not being carried out by our constitutional bodies, by the police force and places like that. And at least to me, it's clear to see how, as a white person, I've benefited from the oppression of people of color. And so when people say Black Lives Matter, they're not saying it. Nobody's trying to say that it's because white people don't matter. And you shouldn't have to be told that white people matter, because you're told from literally every part of your life. So it's not about bringing white people down to build Black people up. It's about trying to raise Black people up so that they actually live in a society where they experience the same benefits that white people do.
And it's calling on white people to use their privilege to actively like make this move forward in progression.
Yeah, this is, we kind of talked about this a little bit on the pre-show aspect, and I'll repeat it because I know your all's Bible studies have really left off. But this is, to me, is very, very much of the parable of the 100 sheep. The 99 of us, we're all safe. We're fine, as you mentioned. The government has told us we're safe. Our parents, our friends, our family, society, we can freely walk pretty much anywhere, and we could look at a cop, not have to worry about that cop coming and browbeating us down or questioning us because we look their direction. We have a member of our society as a class that is not a part of the 99. They're out there, they're lost, they're being oppressed, and yet what are we doing to go find them and to help bring them back is to where we should all, absolutely, we should all be equal amongst the law, amongst the way we look. And, it's still, it's difficult for me when people think otherwise, I find it, I wasn't raised that way. I wasn't raised to think that the color of your skin provided value. And I believe the fruits of your labor is what provides value. Your works, your deeds is what provides you value. And I just think, what a shame that our society, here we are, 2020, and we're still in this country worried about that I wouldn't say worried, that the color of your skin is what provides part of your worth.
Something that I like, going off what you're saying, I was talking to my friend about the college admissions process, and they're saying that it's not fair that Black people get accepted over white people for having the same grades just to meet some diversity qualifications. But that's just another example of how white people are privileged, because it is easier for us to have access to education. So it is systematically harder for Black people to get the same quality of education and get the same grades that we do.
That's true. And when you talk about the laws, now to me, this is one of the funnier things. I mean, you all grew up in Northern Virginia, which is one of the wealthiest places in the United States, and maybe you know this or not, and other people may not know it, but a majority of the school funding comes from property taxes. So education, which is absolutely a way out of poverty, but they're already playing with one hand behind their back, both of their legs tied together, and they're told to play kickball, right? And they can't, like, I grew up in Maryland. I grew up in, I would say still in an affluent area in Annapolis. Well, how is Baltimore City going to compare with Annapolis or Montgomery County? They can't. While the education is the same in terms of what's being delivered, the quality isn't the same. It can't be.
Yeah.
So, why aren't we doing things to provide a level of education? Because we can raise the baseline up. By raising the baseline, we raise society. And how are we, the most powerful country in the world, and yet we have, our overall average education level is, I don't know, I think it's now like in the 60th or something like that. I don't know, I have to look. Anyone can fact check that, but it's not in the top 10, not in the top 5. Yes, we have some schools that are, top 5 in the world, but when you average it out, we're in the top 100. That doesn't seem very good to me.
Does not seem like it's the best. Absolutely. And I think that, like, especially that's a big part of what's important about this movement is it's not just saying Black Lives Matter, and it's not just about police brutality, even though that is a really good example of what's wrong in America, and it's one of the major problems. But as white people, it's not enough to say Black Lives Matter. Something that we've been doing is researching Black-owned businesses in our area and ways to support them and mindfully spending your money. And the economy is such an important tool that we have as individuals that we aren't able to capitalize on because we don't do the research. Like doing things like consciously spending your money where it's needed in lower income communities, in those businesses that need help. Especially with everything going on, those small businesses aren't going to bounce back the same way that Target and Walmart are going to be able to. So and it's one thing to say that things are less expensive from larger owned businesses. And that's why you have to consciously make sacrifices to buy from these organizations and businesses that are run by minorities and don't have the same access that large corporations do.
And honestly, I think COVID has been such an eye-opening event in our healthcare system to show the disparities between access to premium medical care. Like COVID-19 has been killing significantly more Black people than white people, like on a percentage-wise. And it makes, there's no reason for it genetically, but we know it's happening, and our healthcare system's not doing anything to target, to help individuals who we now know are being unfairly exposed to this virus.
Well, I think from that, the healthcare is one aspect. Would really, reason I believe that it's in there is because, well, they don't have the same quality education, what makes you think they have the same quality of food.
Exactly.
And if you're if you have $5 in your pocket, you can fill up your belly in McDonald's.
Right.
And since we get our immune system and our energy from what we consume, if all of what's really being able to access is garbage, well, how do you think your immune system is going to face? And I think that the healthcare aspect is what we're seeing as a result of the other pieces. So we know that that it is affecting, those that are in poverty more because they don't have access to quality intake. And yeah, we're absolutely seeing this. You ladies might find very interesting to read. I know it's a University of Michigan guy, but his name is Ari Weinswig, and I may be mispronouncing his name, but his books are amazing on how to create sustainable business. He calls himself a capitalistic anarchist because when he first went to University of Michigan, he studied essentially 19th century Russian literature, which is a lot about anarchy. And he goes, well, they had some things right. Like if we can sustain communities and we make our business about sustainability, then we all win. I don't need $100 million, but I certainly want to make more than $1 million. But that's also because I'm doing these other things, still trickle down. but his books are really great. He does a lot of things on leadership and how to create businesses, how to create sustainable business. And you're right, these local companies, like a Walmart or a Target, they all have business insurance, like even the small companies. But when that small company has something bad happen to it, their rates going up are much more difficult than for Walmart. Walmart can spread that cost over the thousands and thousands of stores as to how they amortize that for their books. But that local business owner doesn't have that capability of doing so. So it hits them, and it hits them hard. It's, I think, the opposite argument of, bringing back manufacturing to the United States is pretty much not a viable thing. And it's not because we can't do manufacturing. It's the cost of manufacturing, getting the actual manufacturing centers up to particular par with what's in China and Taiwan and Hong Kong and South Korea. They have a workforce education program. So the workforce over there is highly skilled, and it's cheap, and it's in state-of-the-art facilities. But we don't have to compete with Walmart in terms of the local community. We're not trying to provide generic goods necessarily. It's they're providing services, and which is a little bit off topic, but I think your point stands that why if I may pay another $1 or $2 more to that locally owned business, so why not? That's a very small sacrifice. For me to pay, I can go to Walmart or whatever. I look at it more as the large grocery food chains. They're getting stuff from everywhere. We don't really know their quality, but that local store that's getting things from the local farmers, I may pay an extra $1 a pound for those apples, but guess what? Those apples are local, and I'm supporting the community.
Absolutely. And this is in no way to disparage those people who have to, for financial reasons, go to less expensive options that are more commercialized. It just reinforces the importance of people with the privilege to afford these smaller business products to do that.
And it's bigger than supporting your communities at that point. It's also, like we were saying, it's ethically buying. It's not supporting places that use cheap or inhumane labor to make these incredibly low quality and cheap products, as well as
right. And bringing this back to to George Floyd and the other things that continue to occur. I recently attended a rally, and what was your experience?
Yes. So me and my friend Leah and some of our other friends who live in Richmond or from Nova, we went to the Black Lives Matter rally in Richmond this past Monday, June 1st. And it was a very impactful and moving event. There was, I believe, an estimated 4,000 people just in the city of Richmond marching and calling for justice and just expressing their anguish and grief and the problems that they're facing, and also coming together as a community. And however, it did not end on the same note that it began. As we moved through Richmond, the rally stopped around a Robert E. Lee Confederate statue on Monument Ave. And we collected there for moments of silence to listen to each other. And there was a leader. I don't know who his name or who he was, what organization he was with, but he was speaking to the crowd on the importance of peaceful protests and our right to assemble. And the crowd was chanting, "What are we here for? Love." And all of this was about 10 minutes before the Richmond police came in and began tear gassing the crowd without warning, 30 minutes before our curfew started, without any attempt to disassemble the people who were collected there. And it was terrifying. And I remember going down there and thinking, like, this is a peaceful protest and we're going to leave early and we're going to be okay and we're going to stay in a group. And we did go prepared. We brought water and we brought goggles just in case something happened, with the understanding that me and my white friends have the privilege of not being as brutalized as Black people are by the police in these situations. But I remember running for my life down a street just to get back to our car. And it wasn't even like me and my friends, many people were attempting to remain peacefully assembled at the monument. We were trying to get back to our car. Some people were trying to disassemble 30 minutes before our curfew started, before we just saw and heard clouds of smoke and bangs coming out from behind the statue, and people just start panicking. And I don't understand. There was no provocation there. We were on the other side of the statue from when this happened. We were probably like 100 feet away, walking slowly when it actually went off. But we've seen videos from the other side. They were people who were peacefully kneeling in front of the police. They weren't even really saying anything when it went off. And we knew that they were going to be strict about the curfew, which was supposed to start at 8 o'clock. And the fact that they did this early, it was horrifying, and people were terrified, and it was unjust. And I think it's just showing that the police who are acting out right now do not respect our civil liberties. They do not respect the Black Lives Matter movement, and they're not trying to make changes that need to happen.
Well, I would ask then, do you think it's the police or those that the police report to? I
think it has to be.
And we're using generalizations as well. Not all police feel this way, of course, but one bad apple can spoil the bunch. It causes distrust amongst all of us.
I do believe that there are people who go into the police force with the intent of being good or creating change, but the way that the police institution exists and is enforced and is written makes it impossible for there to be police enacting out and doing what they're supposed to be doing, carrying out justice, protecting our civil liberties. And this is an example of that. They are armed against their own citizens. They are armed against the people that they are sworn to protect, who are peacefully protesting. And I just find the idea that police acting in self-defense is harmful, because we'll say, oh, well, they were trying to protect themselves against a 12-year-old unarmed Black kid. The police exist to protect these people, and they're not. And they're not changing anything. They're just arming themselves more against Black people and those trying to support them.
I think they're in a very unwinnable situation. I mean, no matter which way they go, it's going to be bad. It's unfortunate because, as you mentioned, they are there to protect and serve, right? That's supposed to be their mantra, right? Of all police, protect and serve. And this is where I get back into the leadership aspect. I think that we continue to vote for politicians rather than leaders. And as such, if they were leaders, they would want the best training for our men and women in blue. They would want the best policies and procedures. They would be doing everything they can to avoid corruption in their force. Internal affairs wouldn't always be looked at as the bad people. I mean, I work in a regulated industry today. I've pretty much always worked in regulated industry. I welcome the auditors because they're going to make sure I'm doing my job better. But for whatever reason, especially, think about whatever television shows that are out there about the police, anytime, the internal affairs department gets involved, they're like, oh, there's the rats, there's the bad, like, they're not welcome. They are shunned. There is a very valid reason to have them, which is to make sure we are always being better, especially with those that are in the protect and serve industry. I mean, yes, we absolutely need police. We absolutely need them to be the consummate professional, the consummate gentlemen and ladies that are out there serving, because they need to be beyond reproach. And I think we're seeing that they're not in many cases. And that's extremely unfortunate because, I know many of those that wear that uniform, and they're all very, very good people, and they're being tarnished by those that aren't. I mean, in the George Floyd case, many of the men and women in blue have spoken out and have said, that's not what our procedure says. No one is supposed to be on their stomach in handcuffs for 9 minutes. you can't, there's no way for you're going to be able to breathe very well.
Absolutely, and I think we're missing a lot of that. People are saying, well, there's good cops, and we're asking, where are the cops? If you are a good cop, then you should be actively fighting against what is happening in our police system.
It's difficult.
Yeah, and
they designed it to be difficult. They and Cece says this better than I do, but the way they make police squads is they make them dependent on each other. So when there are individuals in that police squad who are racist or prejudiced against Black people, the way that the police system is made, it's hard for them to speak out against it without losing their jobs.
And we've seen police officers who have publicly spoken out against their fellow police officers' actions during these protests, before these protests, and then been fired for it. And it's just the position. I know that there are people who go into policing because they want to make a change and they want to be effective. I can't separate the idea, though, that it is also a position of unwarranted authority that attracts people who are insecure and require a badge and a weapon to enforce their own superiority on others.
And that's why there are statistics that police officers there are higher rates of domestic abusers in police officers. And those are just the cases that are reported, because it's hard for women to come forward and report domestic abuse to the coworkers of her husband. And there have been cases where they do that and they're shut down.
I absolutely believe that. And it's, again, it's a shame. So and I don't know enough about the inner workings of police departments, but I would say, again, because they're supposed to be beyond reproach, right? I think if we start with that premise and we force our elected officials to enforce that, which everyone wants to always focus on the president, and no one really seems to know too much about our locally elected officials. Our locally elected officials are the ones that affect our day-to-day life. And so in the federal government, I had to go through a security clearance, every 6 years, same as your mom, that re-up. I wonder if those same background investigations occur with police. I mean, to me, I would have to say probably not, because there are many domestic violence cases. And if you're a police officer and you have to carry a weapon for your job, then why are you not under an extreme amount of scrutiny to make sure your personal life is also in order? Because your personal life affects your work life and work life affects your personal life. Why is this not going on? Why do we have people carrying a badge and a gun and they have domestic violence cases? They can easily go talk to neighbors. When I get a clearance, they had to talk to my spouse, they had to talk to my parents, they had to talk to my coworkers to find out, am I beyond reproach? Why is this not happening there?
And also, how do we, if the cases of domestic violence and other things are reported to the police, how do we know that they're being accurately reported against police officers? What do we have in place to make sure that things like that happen?
It's created this position with no checks or balances in how they're acting out. Are there systems that are supposed to be checking police officers? Yes. Do I believe they're acting effectively? No. Is there anyone actively out there when police officers are enforcing these laws however they deem fit at the time? No. Did we create body cams? Yes. But the majority of the time that we see, all of this thing that's coming to light of the abuse of Black people and other minorities is from cell phone footages. Just imagine the amount of cases that are happening that aren't being actively filmed in broad daylight. And that's
I think you're right. And this is a funny thing to me, because being someone in technology, I find it interesting the amount of times that body cams and dash cams seem to be malfunctioning during a bad event.
Absolutely.
A Black man was just murdered and there were 11 police officers and none of their body cams were on.
Interesting.
And it's the way that these police officers are viewing body cams and footage like that just reveals how problematic the system is they don't see them as ways to prove their innocence. They see them as damning evidence to be held against them.
And that goes back to our leadership.
Absolutely.
I will always continue to harp on that, which is why I continue to try to get people to vote and to be very, the president, regardless of where everyone's politics are, really has very little to do with our day-to-day life. And we don't pay attention to the, there must be your mom, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the world is going to see you without makeup.
You look great.
Gracias.
When we don't focus on those locally elected officials that are going to help make the change in the communities, because our system of government is a community of communities of larger communities, and keep on going because we're supposed to be a representative government. But how are we being represented? We're being represented not by people that relate to anything of what we are as a community. If that were the case, we wouldn't see as many problems. Like we should not need a Black Lives Matter movement. This is 2020, and yet we still do. Well, I go to think, well, why is that? Because our establishment has people that have been in our elected officials for 30, 40 years. They no longer can even relate. The last time they were probably in their district was when they got elected the very first time. And this is a big reason why I'm a registered libertarian. I cannot stand the Republican Party or the Democrat Party because I think they're both just abysmal. They're horrible. They're not doing anything to help our communities, except when it's election time.
Right. And I do think that is what's so powerful about seeing these protests, is that these protests are the communities. Are there people in communities who are racist? Absolutely. But seeing Richmond was coming together in that movement to show their support for the Black Lives Matter movement, and the police was opposing them. And when you talk on leadership, I love that. And I just think leadership is about empowering the people you lead. And if you are not actively doing that, then you're not leading people, you're using people. And that is happening all the time. And these positions are just attracting people who don't want to lead people. They want to use people for their own self-gain. And that's what we're asking to change. We just want representation that is going to actively represent our communities and fight racism, be actively anti-racist, and all steps of government. And it's hard to see. And Virginia voters, deadline to get an absentee ballot for the June 23rd election, which is my birthday, is June 16th. So especially considering everything going on, I would highly recommend doing that. And you can also get one for November 3rd already, just in case you want to be ready. But yeah, and I'm not Black, so I'm never going to understand the oppression that Black people are facing. But if you aren't seeing it, the real problem I have with the All Lives Matter movement is that is a public, malicious statement that's saying, I don't believe you're being oppressed. And if they don't believe they're being oppressed, they're either choosing
to ignore facts.
Well, I don't know that they're choosing to ignore facts. I think it's very difficult to talk about racism. I think it's very difficult for men in many ways to talk about feminism, and what that is. I mean, take any ism, you put the class that's not a part of that, it's difficult for them to talk about. And I think that's a shame. But I think when a lot of people they don't focus on the facts, they're focusing on their emotions, and they're focusing on something that's very uncomfortable and something that they don't spend any time trying to relate to. For me personally, I had this conversation with someone the other day because actually it was with the gentleman I wanted to come on. I'm like, hey, I won't mention his name until he actually chooses to come on, but I had said, because I don't believe in white privilege for me. But after we started talking, it was, well, Dan, that's because you don't treat people this way. It's not in your world. However, because the way I started think about it was just because it's not relatable to me, there are other people that this is very real for. And because of that, I have to keep acting in the way that, yes, it doesn't matter, because I don't treat anyone like that. And it's going to take decades and decades more of people acting like that color of your skin is not what provides your worth, for this to change. It's going to keep being that way. And that was a very, that was one of the reasons why I asked him to come on, was because that was, I always took it as when people, like the All Lives Matter thing to me was very easy. That's, of course they all matter, but we have a system of people that are being oppressed right now, and why. Because when I look at white privilege, I could go, well, my immediate thought is, well, you're saying that the only reason why I got to where I am today was because I'm a white male. Well, that was why it was taking away for me, because it would seem like it was trying to diminish my accomplishments. But in reality, after I started thinking about it a little bit more, it doesn't matter. It doesn't resonate with me because it's not in my world, because I don't treat people like that. Unfortunately, there are too many other people in this world that do treat their skin color, especially if they're white, as that is something that is superior. And I think that's just as wrong. Like I don't feel I'm better than anyone. My work and my effort is what I feel has defined me. The unfortunate part is, not everyone has had that chance, whether it happened early on or not, which is a big reason why you all interned for me, why, James at that time interned for me. Like, look, I wanted to give people an opportunity to do something, and continue to give back.
Absolutely. And I think, like, I agree that internalizing and looking at your own white privilege is hard. And that's because it's supposed to be, because it's not supposed to be happening, because we know it's wrong. And white people are able to look at their accomplishments and achievements and be like, no, that's not because I'm white. That's because I worked hard, because they're not continually confronted with the color of their skin day after day. And I think that white privilege is inherently molded into all of our establishments and of our government and of America and our economy. And whether or not you are actively being racist, you are experiencing white privilege. White privilege isn't about you being racist. It's about the fact that other people are being oppressed and you have benefited from it, whether you like to be or not.
It's not that white people, or a lot of white people, didn't work hard to get where they are. I'm sure most of them did. It's about the fact that you had opportunities and resources around you that people of color do not have around them. And the fact that that inequality exists is white privilege. Like, it's a privilege that we feel comfortable enough to talk about this right now. Just like the black man that you were going to have on here, he doesn't feel safe or comfortable, or because he's of color and his people are being persecuted across this country. So it's a privilege, because we're white, that we get to come on here and have this talk openly and talk about our opinions and what we believe in.
And that we're not experiencing like the anguish that he must be going through right now.
Absolutely. And that's after, I mean, of course, with him and I, it was one-on-one, and he was like, hey, look, I just appreciate that we're having this conversation. And it's true. I mean, I feel comfortable having the conversation because what defines this young man is not, to me, not the color of his skin. It's the fact that he's a hard worker. He's intelligent. He's fun to be around. And that was one of the big reasons why I hired him, because of those qualities and traits. Not the color of his skin. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know the color of his skin when I first even heard his name being mentioned, because that's not the thing that comes to me. I'm like, okay, great. What's he doing? What's he working on? Things of that nature. And it's a real shame that that we still have to live in a society like that. And I just, I'm glad for the future, because I believe as more and more people are like myself, like your mom, we're teaching these generations that the color of your skin is not what provides value. That's an identifying characteristic, as a no difference in saying that you're a brunette or a redhead or whichever. That's just a characteristic of who you happen to be, but not what defines your value. I'm so hopeful for the future, because I think these movements are going to cause change. When we look at the last elections, over even in my lifetime, which thankfully your mom is still very much older than what I am. So she's been around for many more elections, but we don't even get a 50% voter turnout. So if we can't get it, so which means every major election, only 25.1% of the voting is actually reflecting what the other 74.9% is out there,
Right.
because that's what's winning elections. A minority is showing up to vote, and a smaller minority is basically choosing the winner of all of our elections.
Right. And I do, and I'm just afraid that this movement is going to be taken lightly by people who don't have to take it seriously, i.e. white people and maybe other minorities. Like on social media on this previous Tuesday, yesterday, there's a movement called Blackout Tuesday, which was believed to be different things by different people, but there was about 28 million people who posted on their Instagram a picture of a black screen and the hashtag Blackout Tuesday. But there's only 13.5, maybe 11 million people who have signed the George Floyd petition. So if there are people who are saying that they support the Black Lives Matter movement, but they're not really doing anything, and it's a superficial level of not even support, of barely even acknowledging it. So I think it's important that these people who are saying that they're supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, who are saying that they're an ally, that they do everything in their power to support Black people. That means voting, that means donating, that means spreading awareness of information and Black narratives and believing Black narratives. And like, we've been really lucky to have the upbringing that we had and be exposed to people of color and be told that they are just as valued as you, and they are going to experience things that you're never going to experience, that, and that enhances their achievements that you're not going to have. And I feel very bad for those people who don't. And I do think there needs to be an understanding that we don't want people to turn away from this movement. We want people to change. We want people to look at themselves and the privilege that they've had and understand it and acknowledge it, and then actually do something about it.
So even if let's take your 11 million people that chose to sign the George Floyd petition. That's not even 10% of the country. What because I haven't seen the statistics. What's the age breakdown of those 11 million? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I believe it's the majority of younger people.
Right. I was going to say, I'm willing to believe that if I had to place a bet and I had to put a percentage of that 11 million, I'd be willing to bet that the majority, and I'll go with an overwhelming majority, are younger than 30.
Absolutely. I would too. And that's who we share things with. You know, we don't have this is being circulated amongst our circles, against younger people's circles, and it's a young people's movement. And of course there are other age groups who are at protests and doing things, but I think that the rhetoric that our generation is lazy needs to be put aside, but also that these people who are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and are saying that they're allies, if they don't show out to vote and do all of the other things they're supposed to be doing to be anti-racist, then it's pointless and it's superficial, and they are subsequently acknowledging white privilege and then doing nothing about it.
So what things would you, if you all were, what things would you recommend for your generations that are going to be coming up behind you, and the ones that are like your mom's age? What would you recommend? Let's start with people of your mom's age.
think-
Age before beauty.
So if the generations above us, particularly people who have positions of powers in either universities or companies or businesses, etc., if they have the opportunity to create diversity in the spheres they're in, you should feel obliged to do it. Do you have anything?
I think also just continually re-examining yourself in the way that you view Black people, the way that you view your own privilege. And I think the big thing is listen to Black narratives. The last thing that I want to happen with the Black Lives Matter movement is to put my name, me being a white person, in front of it, because that's not what's supposed to happen. This is about challenging all the preconceived notions you had about people of color and white privilege and justice and racistness in institutions. And there's lots of ways to do that that people don't know about. One thing that I've been recommending to my friends, because it's free, is Haymarket Books, which is a publishing company, is offering Alicia Garza, I think her name, her book, Who Do You Protect and Who Do You Serve, on
Who do you serve, who do you protect?
Who Do You Serve, Who Do You Protect on police brutality in America. And it's free to download on the internet until June 5th. And there's documents on Netflix, and there's a plethora of Black narratives that you can look into. It's just a matter of doing it, of putting in that work. I know that I've already downloaded the book. I haven't had the chance to read it yet because me and Olivia have had a couple exams today and yesterday, but I am really excited to start. And just be willing to change your opinion. Be willing to acknowledge that maybe I was wrong. And there's parts of racism that are ingrained in people in ways that we can't imagine, in their upbringing, in the things that they were given by the media to understand, in the way that our educational system teaches about history and Black history and minimizing the Black side of history. And just being able to say, maybe I'm wrong, especially for older generations. Yeah.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and science is really about accepting or rejecting the null hypothesis. It's never about being right. It's about accepting or rejecting being wrong. And since you all are both looking to go into the science field as trying to be doctors at some point, you're going to have that quite a bit, because it's about accepting or rejecting being wrong. And we always have to be looking at the outline of our center of knowledge. And I've said this a couple of times before on some previous episodes. Take all of your knowledge and say it's a campfire. What is illuminated is everything that you don't know yet. And so the bigger your fire gets, so bigger is all of the things that you don't know, because you've become much more aware. And if you don't evolve, then your fire is going to go out, and that's it. Like, you don't want the notion of the center of your world ends at the mailbox, right? If that's all you know, that's not very good. And yes, I after speaking with the young man, I changed a little bit of, yes, I don't believe I've gotten anything because I'm white, because I don't treat other people that way, but that doesn't mean that other people have not benefited in using those things to do that. And I also think that the part of the reason as to why I don't believe that the color of someone's skin provides value is because I grew up playing sports. And because of that, my community, in terms of like what I lived with on a day-to-day basis, was because I played sports. I was always around other types of people, and not everyone did that either. I mean, it was just, that wasn't always there, didn't exist. But it definitely goes back to, I look back at the community, at the education system. The people of color are predominantly living in a poor area, and they don't have the same level of education that the others do. And education is already considered basically like part of the welfare system, like utilities and garbage collection, and all those things are kind of lumped into one. So if you happen to be living in a more affluent area, why then not just send your kids to private school, and those public school funds can be better distributed? I mean, that's, and when we look at a socialized healthcare, which I'm not necessarily for, and for many ways, because I think it actually degrades the healthcare system. People find a way around it, but if they did, then the people who are wealthier are just going to buy private insurance still to get a better healthcare. It doesn't do anything. So let's take those same funds, because property taxes are distributed, by the government, which affect affect the public schools. It's a very easy way to get things in there. I mean, another thing, which is what I did, when I was at Cap Tech, we recruited from more areas that were not affluent, I would say even poor, because I know that technology is a difference maker very quickly. You just have to have desire and a Chromebook, which costs less than most people's iPhones, because you can get a good Chromebook for $200-300 instead of that iPhone. Run Linux on it, and all of a sudden they could be they could be a part of the computer science program of those universities very quickly and get scholarships. That's how the young man that works for me today got to where he is because his mom made sure he went into computer science.
Absolutely. I think that's another way that we can support Black communities is investing in them with those kind of technologies, and to acknowledge that Black people don't live in poorer areas because they failed. They live in these poorer areas because we have failed them, because the system has failed them. And that's why it's our responsibility to build them back up and support them in their businesses, in their education, in their finances, in their independence, and especially against brutality and racism that is still rampant across this country.
And also, like you said, his mom wanted him to get into these things. So it's also just about supporting them and giving them confirmation and allowing them to feel like they have a space in the world. And that's such an easy thing to do. It's just called not being cruel, and going, or not even going out of your way, but being a good person and making sure that these people have the same support and resources that you had.
Absolutely. And I don't think, this is the big thing to me, it's not that much effort that is required to just be good. That's why it's so hard for me to comprehend the amount of racism that is still left in this country, because I look at it through my eyes and I go, well, I can't say that I haven't seen racism, but when I have, I speak up. But not everyone does. And we see this, unfortunately, way too many times. It saddens me that it still happens, but I have so much hope in talking with you all and other people of the upcoming generations as to what's going to transpire. So I believe that I will live to see a day where racism will be the minority. I believe that I will see a day where, you don't see these police-like activities that are killing people of color. It'll be few and far between. Now it seems like it's just way too often. And that's unfortunate, but I believe I'll live to see that day.
I think one of the big issues with racism isn't that it's trickling in from the top, from the government down. It's that it occurs in the roots, in people's homes, and it's making its way up into the government. And that's so much harder to combat. So people just have to open their eyes and be willing to have hard conversations and not turning their back on people who need them.
And I think people have to acknowledge that they're allowed to change their minds. I think there's so many people that are so stuck in what they've been raised to believe and what they believe their whole life that they're not living in reality, they're living in their own perspective. Like if you believe everything that you believe when you were 12 or 15, then you're probably wrong about something. you haven't lived and then learned things and then changed your mind and changed your perspective, then you're not really listening and you're not really learning.
I agree. I mean, I changed my mind several times, even with COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Based on the data that I had at the time of which I was given, I made certain decisions based on that, and how I think about it now is certainly different than the way I thought about it on March 1st, because I got new data, and I'm comfortable being wrong. It doesn't happen very often, but I'm still comfortable with it.
Absolutely. And I think like I will probably go back and listen to this and be like, I wish I said something different, but just taking like what you're doing and what you've learned and be able to change your mind into what is actually happening and not your own narrative.
Right. Well, because it's not, if the moment that we start thinking only about ourselves, it becomes no longer a logical argument, because you cannot argue specific to general. It's general to specific. And so when I started looking at things about, oh, well, this isn't true for me, that doesn't mean I can be the outlier.
Right.
And that's not, which is great. I'm glad I'm an outlier. But that doesn't mean it's not happening in the rest of society. So, I don't want to be a part of just being an outlier, because I know, and this is what always just gets me about people who say they're capitalists. If you're a capitalist, then you want the best people, and it should not, matter of fact, the fact that they are however their sexual orientation is, their religious affiliations, the color of their skin should never matter. If you're a capitalist, you want the best. Also, as being a part of the capitalist, don't you want a better workforce? And if you do, then you want to raise everyone up. But the place where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck are in the communities that are currently oppressed.
That need it the most, exactly.
You're going to see, you can gain a huge amount of quality in the next generations of the workforce coming up by investing into that. It's just, we take a venture capitalist approach. VCs aren't investing in Microsoft because they're not going to make the returns. They're investing in ideas from people who are just starting that have potential. So if we are all created equal, then why not give those people of color the opportunity to get the multiplier in returns on that investment? It just, to me, it's like, that's why I just don't get the capitalist aspect, because clearly you're focused on the wrong principles of capitalism. Capitalism is great when it's being applied because you want to get a return on your investment. Well, look at society. There's a whole population group that has the same capacity and desire for learning, education, and also creating some net worth. Well, it's time to start investing in them.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies, I greatly appreciate you coming on. I hope you will continue your support of not just of movements like Black Lives Matter, but for when anything is wrong, that you all are a part of that, because there will be new ones. It won't just be unfortunately, it won't just be Black Lives Matter. It will be something else next. So I also still hope to have you all on to talk about how COVID-19 has affected you. But again, I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for having us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. I
All
do
right.
think this is an important conversation, and we're going to keep having it.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Bye, Dan.
Peace out.